Hello, friends. My knife is coming. Wow, you have magic. It's so cool. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. There resides a local legend in Salem, Alabama, one tucked far away in the corner of rural America, far off the beaten path, far from even the middle of nowhere, a legend that rears its head only once a year. Pope's Haunted Farm. For over 25 years, Pope's has made a killing in my area. I'd call it a mom and pop Halloween stop, but Pope's is so much more elaborate than that. Not to mention pricier, but the money is worth it. I haven't been since I was a kid, but I can still remember the Pope's being quite the setup. It wasn't just local drunks in clown masks either. I mean, they had that too. But Pope's offered something more. Tunnels full of billowing smoke, rooms with distorted mirrors, haunted trailers scattered about a dark, haunted forest. You get the idea. In addition to the obligatory jump scares, Pope's gave you a harrowing atmosphere. You really felt like you were lost and disoriented on this terrifying farm, trapped in a hillbilly nightmare. And shit, in Columbus, Georgia, Pope's was the closest place to get our Halloween kicks. It sounds crazy considering Columbus is 10 times the size of Salem, but it's true. Pope's was only a 30-mile drive, and there wasn't anything else in Salem anyway. Just getting lost out in that rural wasteland would give you chills. I mean, it's nothing but empty fields and abandoned buildings. Honestly, they should have just called the city Copeland. But then again, Salem is a pretty appropriate name as well. During October, my friends and I were serious about going the Friday before Halloween, but as the weeks rolled by, our crew fell apart one by one. Everyone bailed, like they did every year. By the time that fateful Friday arrived, all we had left were the reliables, me, my girlfriend Veronica, and Veronica's 18-year-old brother JJ. Veronica and I had been dating for well over a year, so the three of us had gotten pretty close by now. JJ didn't mind being the third wheel either. Then again, why would he consider we supplied the alcohol and paid his way most of the time? An hour before takeoff, Veronica, and JJ were waiting on Veronica's best friend Lauren. We'd already gotten a table at a Mexican restaurant, pre-game for the show. This wasn't even counting all the alcohol we already had stored in Veronica's SUV. Supposedly, Lauren and her boyfriend were gonna show, but they cancelled at the last minute. In epic bitch fashion, I might add. Dejected, Veronica wondered if we should still go. It was already 10 and they stopped selling tickets at 11, and Salem was a 20-minute drive. I pleaded with Veronica that we still had time. Salem was an hour behind us. I reminded her we still had almost 2 hours to get tickets. And then, like a message from the Halloween gods, Veronica got a text from her other bestie Kati. Kati hadn't hung out with us in months. Sure, she and Veronica had talked, but this came out of nowhere, and she actually wanted to go to Pope's with us. This surprised me since Kati wasn't one for getting scared. Hell, she never even bothered going to horror movies with us. She was more like a romantic comedy type. But fuck it, she liked to drink, and we now had a real group for the night's festivities. I and Veronica were Nicki fans, but hey, we liked to party with Kati. Around 10:30. The four of us left in Veronica's SUV. I sat in the back with JJ while Veronica and Kati were up front. We had over an hour and a half to get tickets, so we took our time. Not for the scenic atmosphere, but to drink. I and JJ had a 12-pack to share. The girls countless mini bottles of liquor. I didn't know Kati all that well aside from our drunken nights spent at Outlaws and other bars, but she was always nice to me. From what I understand, her boyfriend Josh was a real douche though. I never pressed Veronica for more info, but the problems seemed to lean toward abuse. Either way, I was glad Kati came tonight. She mentioned just wanting to get away from Josh, so I was glad she joined. After all, getting scared is always more fun with a group. We crossed the state line around 10:45. I was buzzed, and I was sure everyone else was. Veronica is thankfully an expert drunk driver though, so I wasn't too worried about that. Not that it mattered much since no one else was on the road anyway. I mean, not a single car. I looked over and saw Veronica's cell phone sitting in her lap. The GPS showed the address for Pope's 13 Farm Road. As we got closer to our destination, I could feel the excitement growing inside both me and the car. I played my Halloween mix much to Veronica's annoyance. Hey, at least everyone else was enjoying it. Amidst the playlist of screaming sound effects and Halloween jams, I could tell Kati was nervous, more so from dread than excitement. Veronica teased her about it during the drive, and from my perspective, the booze didn't seem to be helping Kati's nerves any. Veronica grinned at Kati. "Don't be nervous. I got your back, girl." "You better," Kati replied, smiling. I watched their playful banter. I didn't want to tell Kati this, but she was so fucked when we got there. Popes could sniff out fear faster than an intimidating convict. This kind of place made their money off people they could easily scare. If there weren't any kids or preteens, Kati was gonna be the #1 target. I saw Veronica turn onto a dirt road. Sure, this was where the GPS was taking us, but somehow, it seemed weird, unfamiliar. Then again, maybe I was just drunk. I remembered seeing the usual array of shit barns and trailers on the way to Pope's, but out here, there was nothing. Just a dense forest. No one else seemed to care though, so I didn't let it bother me. Even when I realized there were no other cars around us, Werewolves of London played on the radio, leading us all into a chorus of drunken howls. But it didn't distract me from my unease. Why weren't there any signs for Popes? They usually had weirdos walking around in costumes to guide you to. JJ handed me another beer. "Hey, you want this?" Grabbing the can, I looked over at Kati. She was quiet and gripping a mini bottle like it was a weapon. "Kati, just relax," Veronica told her. Kati let out a chuckle, an obvious nervous tick. I leaned in toward Veronica. "How far away are we?" Veronica stole a glance at her phone. Confusion hit her. "Shit, it says we're already here." "What?" Nervous, Veronica held her phone up, and she was right. The destination was supposed to be on the left, but I don't see anything, Veronica said. She looked out the windshield. "That's weird," Kati said. I followed Veronica's gaze. The headlights only showed the desolate dirt road and surrounding forest. "I can be crushed," startled me and Kati. I looked over to see JJ holding an empty can. At least, the situation wasn't bothering him. "Are we almost there?" JJ asked in a drunken, lackadaisical tone. "You don't remember how to get there?" Veronica asked me. She turned down the radio, a sign she meant business. I looked out the windshield. "I don't know. There should be a sign or something." "Oh my god," Kati yelled in fright. We all saw it up ahead. A small light waving on the left. A bright, glowing lantern shaped like a grinning pumpkin. "That's gotta be it," Veronica said. She pulled in toward the light. As we got closer, I saw Kati sink back in her seat faster than a child watching a scary movie. I looked over and saw what scared her. Holding the lantern, a lumbering clown stood near a dark side road. The road appeared to be a long dirt driveway, like a discount Pennywise. The clown wore ragged, colorful clothing, as if he were from a 1930s circus, or at least wearing apparel from that era. The lantern looked just as old. It was a handmade lantern, Someone had carved it like it was a real pumpkin, but it had to be the clown's face that sent Carty into cardiac arrest. He had on a heavy mask. Faded red and white paint was all over it. His painted expression an indifferent glare. The fresh makeup around his mouth and eyes was pointed rather than round. At a circus, the man would have been fired for doing a half-assed job, but out here in the dark, he was fucking terrifying. Uneasy, JJ leaned in toward Veronica. "You sure we should like to pull over?" Ignoring him, Veronica stopped near the clown and rolled down the window. "Hey there," she said. The man just stared at us like he was studying our crew. Dead silent. "Is this Pope's?" Veronica asked, doing her best to stifle her shaky voice. No answer. Even the forest was totally silent. I heard no cars, no laughter, no screams, not even a damn animal. I leaned in closer to support Veronica. "The GPS took us here," I said to the clown. Instead of an answer, the clown just looked over at Carty, like he was drawn to her obvious fear. Terrified, Carty squirmed back in her seat. "Hey," Veronica demanded, moving slower than a mime. The clown confronted her. "Where do we park?" Veronica said. With startling quickness, the clown reached toward Veronica. I started to lunge out my seat. "Hey, asshole." "Whoa, hold on." A voice of obnoxious friendliness echoed toward us. Startled, we all saw a blonde-haired man wrap an arm around the clown. The man looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed as an old carnival barker, checkered vest and bow tie. Apparently, Pope's theme this year was Great Depression-era carnivals. The blonde had that look of an ultra-friendly street performer. You know, a con artist. All fast talk and charisma, no sincerity, a permanent smile on his face. Displeased, the clown didn't show any sign of friendliness toward the man. He just kept his cold eyes on Carty. "Hey, I'm Joey," the blonde told us in a shit-shooter tone. He squeezed the clown's shoulder, further aggravating the masked man. "I'm sorry about Bozo here. He doesn't talk too much." "No, that's fine," Veronica said. Joey pointed down the side road. "Just pull on in there. Park anywhere you like." Hesitant, Veronica looked down the dark road. It looked bumpy and rough, more like a trail than a road. "It doesn't look crowded." "No, you all got here a little late," Joey insisted. He leaned in closer. His face resembled an enthusiastic ventriloquist's dummy, like a walking cartoon. "But you all still got a few more hours." He turned his grin toward Carty. "It's Friday night after all." Her discomfort obvious, Carty did her best to avoid looking at Joey's beaming smile. "Thanks," Veronica said. "If you all need anything, just let me know," Joey said. He grabbed the clown's arm. "Let's go, Bozo." The two friends made their way back toward the woods. They were a strange pairing, on totally opposite ends on the customer service archetypes. Veronica looked over at me. "Well, we're already here." "Yeah, let's go," JJ chimed in with drunken excitement. Veronica faced Carty. "What do you think?" Smiling, Carty pulled another mini bottle from her bag. "Fuck it." We all laughed as Veronica turned onto the side road. Our crew jumped with each bump the SUV hit. I noticed the darkness here stemmed not from anything supernatural, but from how the tall trees spiraled into one another to form a collective roof over the road. Feeling buzzed, I stole a look back. I wasn't sure, but I thought I saw a figure standing a few feet behind us. They watched us drive off, a great big smile on their face, an undeniable smile that had to be Joey's. Soon, we parked in a field that had been converted into a makeshift parking lot. A few scattered jack-o'-lanterns were the only source of light. Not optimal, but hey, the atmosphere was cool. Not many people were left. arrived. I counted less than 10 cars. Strange for a Friday night in October, I thought. In the car, Veronica and Carty polished off their remaining mini bottles. Needless to say, me and JJ were still lit. Hell, we all were. I reminded everyone they'd stop selling tickets soon, and we made our way out. The night was just getting started. We walked up to the front entrance. It was just an old shed with Haunted Farm painted across the top of it. A small open window was the place's makeshift ticket booth, like the parking lot. This was so grassroots. No one was in line. Behind the entrance gate, I could make out a conglomeration of sheds and old buildings. Needless to say, it was pretty dark and empty. The looming forest surrounded us for miles. I guess the Haunted Farm was our closest avenue to civilization, and I wasn't sure that was a good thing. I wrapped my arm tight around Veronica. She giggled as she teased Carty about all the scary shit that awaited us. JJ's drunken laughter blared through the night. A cool breeze swept through our group, sending us chills. I held on to Veronica just to stay warm. All I had on was a hoodie. Pope's had to be at least 10 degrees cooler than Columbus. At the ticket booth, a kind lady sold us our tickets. I paid for everyone with cash. I didn't mind as it was so much cheaper than I remembered. You came on a lucky night, the lady told us. A lit jack-o'-lantern was the only light inside her shed. The lady herself looked to be too young to be one of those senior citizen volunteers, but too old to be a minimum wage co-ed. Regardless of her wrinkles and lack of makeup, she was quite cute. A nice smile plastered on her face. The jack-o'-lantern basked her in a favorable yet mysterious light. Just how she wanted it, I figured. Like Joey, she wore the same strange 1930s carnival barker outfit. Even her name tag used a flashy font fit for the era's marquees. Faye, Haunted Farm Curator. Why is it our lucky night? JJ chuckled. With a wide smile that rivaled Joey's, Faye handed him a ticket. It's half price this weekend. Shit, that's crazy, I blurted out. Veronica gave me a light punch on the shoulder. Patrick. Faye's smile never vanished. Just don't use that language when you're out there getting scared, she teased. Oh, I won't, I responded. Yeah, right, Veronica joked. Everyone but Carty chuckled. Her nervous gaze stayed fixated on the Haunted Farm. She looks reminiscent of a terrified soldier looking on at a battlefield. Faye sat in her chair. I'd recommend going through the barn first. She motioned off toward the very back of the farm, toward the woods. Then save the haunted forest for last. They're the last ones to close. Awesome, I commented. Reverberating with drunken excitement, JJ was ready to lead the way. All right, let's go. Veronica gave me a sloppy wet kiss. You gon' protect me? I'll do my best, I quipped. As if she sensed her fear, Faye looked right at Carty. Is this your first time? Startled, Carty looked at her like a student who'd just been ambushed by a suspicious teacher. Yeah, I usually don't do these sorts of things. Why'd you tell her? Veronica joked. We all laughed. Faye's laugh was pleasant if louder than all of ours combined. Well, you'll have fun, Faye told Carty. This farm's been here for years, but they can't like to touch us, right? The nervous Carty asked, confused. Faye stared right at Carty. What do you mean? Oh shit, JJ joked, chuckling. Veronica wrapped an arm around Carty. I got you, girly. As we entered through the gate opening, Veronica did her best to comfort Carty. I suspected Veronica knew her efforts would be in vain, but she had to be the supportive best friend. I stole a look back at Faye, but the booth was empty. The jack-lantern's light had been put out. I guess we really were the last customers. I realized that like Joey, Faye resembled another caricature. Rather than a shit-shooting barker, she reminded me of those gentle caretakers you see in the movies. You know, the ones who either take care of cemeteries or oddball attractions like this. Once we got to the farm, the breeze picked up, and so did the chills. I had flashbacks to my first trip to this farm. There was a large barn, the eerie stables, a cornfield populated by abandoned wagons and tall stalks, a small bathroom, even a concessions stand positioned under a red tent. The whole area itself was lit up by nothing more than an army of jack-o'-lanterns. We stopped next to a stable. Tall skeleton figurines and mannequins stood inside it, most of the females. The sight was more glorious than a Halloween manger scene. I, Veronica, and JJ enjoyed checking out the farm. On the other hand, Carty was scared shitless. However, things still looked different to me. It felt different, at least. I remembered the Popes being a little more modern. There were vending machines, constant rock and party music blaring on the speakers. Here, the farm was quiet. Either Popes had downsized or they really were pushing this AHS freak show shit 4 years too late. I counted more workers than customers, more monsters than customers too. There was Joey lurking by the concession stand. He gave us that never-ending smile, practically begging us to come to buy an overpriced drink. A few more carnies were near us as well, their uniforms all just as outrageous. Joey and Faye's. I even saw a few kid carnies complete with their own little uniforms. One of them even had a cheesy carnival barker cane. Then there were the monsters. Their masks were quite impressive. The place had everything from walking scarecrows to aliens to a tall werewolf. Most of them stayed in the shadows, probably navigating through all the attractions. I figured. Either way, they seemed to enjoy gawking at us. Their way of pre-game intimidation. Michael Myers popped up right next to Carty. The dude even carried a real butcher knife. This farm wasn't fucking around. Shrieking, Carty snatched JJ's arm. That's just gonna make Michael jealous, I joked to her. With that, Mikey stormed off into the forest. I think you're the one pissing him off, Veronica said to me. Annoyed, Carty took a deep breath. God, this shit is freaking me out. Guys, yo, look over there, JJ yelled. We all turned to see our clown friend from earlier walking off into the cornfield. The lantern swung back and forth in his grip like a pendulum. Oh, God, Carty exclaimed. Looks like he's waiting on us, I joked in a mock horror host voice. As he heard me through the cold silence, Bozo stopped and faced us with that glaring mask. His stare down long and intense. I noticed Carty's grip squeeze the blood from JJ's arm. His cringing face made it obvious. Hey, man, I yelled to the clown in all my drunken obnoxious glory. The clown held the lantern to his face and waved me over. Not a taunting wave, like one a friendly neighbor gives you. What the fuck, I thought. Veronica gave me a deserved punch on the shoulder. Chill, babe. I am, I replied. I looked back at the cornfield, but the clown was gone. Emerging from the stable, a tall female skeleton staggered toward Carty. Apparently, they weren't all mannequins and figurines. Yelling with final girl lungs, Carty jumped back in fright. Shit, I yelled, like a pleading mime. The female skeleton held her gloved hands out toward us. Her anguished skull mask stared back at me and Veronica. The eyes behind it are even more pitiful, sympathetic even. Hey, let's go, man, JJ said. He led us toward the barn in a hurry. Lagging behind, Veronica stared at the skeleton. The skeleton woman stayed by the stable, but she kept her eyes on us. She extended a hand out toward Veronica in a timid gesture. Come on, Veronica. JJ called to her. I grabbed Veronica's hand. Let's go. Together, we followed JJ and Kati. But neither of us could stop looking back at that melancholy skeleton. She wasn't even trying to scare us. She wanted our attention. The first few attractions were awesome. I loved the fucking barn. I'd forgotten just how huge it was. The thing was like a rickety barn on the outside and a warehouse of corridors on the inside. There were elaborate rooms full of smoke and fog, a clown's section, hospital operating tables, and yes, a guy with a chainsaw. But it all felt so cinematic. The motherfuckers even had a mental asylum breakdown scenario play out. The mummified woman holding a crying baby really got me. Then again, it got everyone. I thought I even heard JJ screaming more than Kati. Even as veterans of the scare scene, me and Veronica couldn't help it either. We fucking screamed like crazy too. I heard one of the carnies bark across the barn for me to stop cussing. But hey, I couldn't help it. Surprisingly, the monsters weren't even the scariest part. They mostly stayed in their lane. None of them even really jumped out for cheap scares either. At least, they didn't seem to be trying to. Most of the scares came from the atmosphere and situations, which I can appreciate. More of the same happened on the hayride through the haunted cornfield. The field's dilapidated sheds housed all sorts of creepy scenes, seances, cult rituals, etc. The cornfield itself housed plenty of the monsters as well, only none of them jumped out at us or ambushed us as I expected. I remembered the popes being known for that. What a pleasant surprise, I figured. And the fucking scarecrows, holy shit. We could never tell which were fake and which were planted until the carny drove us right next to them. We screamed and screamed again. During the hayride, Kati was clinging to both Veronica and JJ's arms, squeezing the life out of the siblings. I'm glad I had a corner seat. God knows, her screams were rupturing my eardrums bad enough as is, and she'd been screaming all night, like bees on honey. The monsters followed us around the entire time. They gravitated to Kati. Michael Myers, in particular, wouldn't let up. Sure, they all kept their distance and didn't touch us. They just stalked in the shadows. This was awesome for me and Veronica, and a total nightmare for Kati. But something still bothered me inside. Sure, there were cars in the parking lot. Some cars. But where the fuck was everyone at? Wouldn't employee parking be elsewhere? Throughout the attractions, I only saw a family, two middle-aged parents and their young son and daughter. Both the son and daughter wore glasses and black Halloween sweaters. They all looked like a bunch of suburbanites, a nuclear family straight out of a sitcom. Like Kati, those kids didn't have a chance. The monsters gravitated toward them, and all the animatronic props seemed to specifically target them. Together, their shrill screams formed a reoccurring soundtrack for the farm. It was getting close to 1 a.m. by the time we were ready to embark on the haunted forest. We made our way up to the bathrooms for a quick piss break, and sure enough, Mikey Myers was following us. The jack-o'-lantern lighting shined off his vicious knife. I noticed the light also illuminated his scarred, craggy hands. So many cuts and scars ran along with the man's thick fingers. None of the wounds looked fake either. At least, he kept about a 5-foot distance between us. Not that helped Kati's nerves any. Anxious, she kept glancing back like a squad car was trailing her. I looked around for the sitcom family, but they were now gone. Come to think of it, they weren't on the hayride either. Maybe they left early? Apparently, like all the other damn customers had. So now here we were, just us, the workers, and the creatures of Pope's farm. Who's ready for the haunted forest? I asked. The final attraction, JJ said with a smile. Veronica chuckled, shivering. Carty zipped up her jacket. As we kept walking, Veronica pulled me in closer. Her seductive smile caught my eye. We shared another kiss. Grinning, I looked back. No monsters were behind us now, not even Michael. "Hey, I think we're safe now, Carty," I joked. The bathrooms were surprisingly clean. Too clean, especially for a haunted farm. Then again, judging by tonight's showing, they must have been hardly used. JJ and I each took a beer-powered piss. I walked up to the mirror and tried to straighten my hair. Unlike the rest of the farm, at least the bathroom had real lighting. Loud, humming bulbs lit it up like a clinical lab. JJ headed for the door. "I'll be outside." "All right," I replied. I was all alone. Right before I was gonna leave, the bathroom door swung open. I turned to see the werewolf stop in front of the doorway. The tall dude was dressed in black robes, his face disguised by a furry mask. Big ears, long snout. Scared by the sudden entrance, I staggered back. "Whoa, you scared me," I said with a smile. The wolfman just stood there. His dark eyes looked on at me, never blinking. "Nice mask," I added. And then the werewolf walked into one of the stalls. I watched him close the door and lock it. An overpowering stream of urine was heard hitting the toilet water. All I saw was his wild hair sticking up above the stall walls. The crazy fucker left his mask on. Hopefully, he wouldn't piss on himself. Then another stall door opened up and out walked Michael Myers. The same Michael Myers we just saw earlier. His scarred hand still held that long knife. Uneasy, I watched him march up to me. He'd never taken his mask off either, and right now his stoic eyes were marking me, just like the blade was. As he got closer, Mikey raised the sharp knife. His other cut-up hand reached out toward me. Fuck it. I hate to admit when I'm scared, but right then I was terrified. I bolted for the door, leaving the restroom in a hurry. Outside, Veronica and they were waiting. Concerned, Veronica grabbed my shoulder. "Hey, are you okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." Turning, I looked back at the bathroom. To my relief, Michael hadn't followed me out. "I'm fine. Let's go to the haunted trail before they close," JJ said. Carty took a deep breath. "The last one, right?" Chuckling, Veronica hugged her. "We'll make it." The three of them walked toward the trail. The haunted forest's banner showed cackling monster faces and jack-o'-lanterns amongst all the other Halloween caricatures. All of them were on the banner's canvas of an illustrated forest. I looked over at the bathroom for a moment, but no one ever came out. No Wolfman, no Michael Myers. "Come on, Patrick," I heard Veronica yell. Nervous, I followed after them. There was no point in being alone, especially if any of those motherfuckers ever came out of the bathroom. Besides, we still hit the haunted forest, after all. Hello, my friends. I love bros, but we want the werewolf story. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. My little brother Jason and I used to love playing in the basement. There's a very concrete reason for why we are both scared of it, but for vastly different reasons. It's hard to explain. Here's the thing. One night a few weeks ago, Jason and I were playing pool in the basement. It came down to the 8 balls, and then we heard a noise. Scratching from that crawl space. Jason and I boarded up because we were so scared of it. The deep, square-shaped patch of darkness always haunted out nightmares. Growing up, we had always dared each other to enter, but neither of us found the courage. The scratching grew louder, to the point Jason covered his ears, and I winced. What the hell is that sound? I asked, growing more irritated by the second. The boards began to rattle, so Jason and I gave each other a look of sheer terror and fled up the stairs. Then the strangest thing happened. As soon as we got up the stairs and closed the door, Jason turned to me. He had a blank expression on his face. "So are we going to play some pool?" Jason just stared at me, confused and irritated. I just told him I was feeling tired, maybe we'd play later if I was feeling up to it. I'm several years older than Jason. It didn't make sense for me to tell my parents that we heard rattling down there, especially if my younger brother didn't back me up. I'd really look crazy then. A few days went by without me going down to the basement to play pool. My parents wondered what was wrong. I just told them that I was maybe coming down with something and didn't feel like doing much. "Come on, Liam. You know how much your brother loves the pool. How about one game?" My dad pressed, using one of his trademark warm smiles to manipulate me. I agreed, and my muscles tensed with every step. Jason and I got about halfway through when we heard the rattling sound and saw the boards shake. Jason and I both screamed and ran up the steps. Same thing as before. Dad asked Jason what had happened down there, and Jason just shook his head. "Nothing, Daddy," he said. "Actually, I don't remember anything." Dad and Mom gave me a suspicious glare. It wasn't until the following day that shit really hit the fan. "Look, son, I know you're at that precarious age where maybe you haven't developed your moral center yet. But, your mother and I were wondering whether or not you're messing with your brother down there in the basement." "What? What do you mean, like abusing him? What the fuck? You know I would never do that." I was really pissed off my dad would even suggest such a thing. "Oh. Hold on, kiddo. I never said abuse. I said messing with brother, always fuck with each other. Fact of life. We just want to make sure nothing is going on down there that might scar him long term." Scar his long term sounded like language my mum would use. I told my dad, emphatically, that no, I would never deliberately terrify Jason. I blew out a long sigh and told him what I had seen down there. I said I hesitated to tell him because he might think I was crazy. "You should have said something, son. Let's check it out right now." So we did. I went down to the basement and my dad stared at the boards blocking access to the crawl space for some time. Dad noticed one of them had come a little loose. "You're saying they rattled the boards?" Dad seemed like he was interrogating me. Like he didn't believe me. I started to feel like I was going crazy, that maybe my mind really did make everything up. Well, just as Dad and I were heading up the stairs, we heard it rattling. One of the boards flew across the room and banged against the wall. So Dad ran to the wall, and usually, I don't think he does stupid things, but hell, he stuck his arm right in there. He fished around for a minute, then when my heartbeat began to slow down, he looked like his arm got completely sucked into the hole. Dad screamed, and I went over to him, pulling with all my strength until he collapsed onto the floor, arm bloody and shaking. The rest of the day was miserable. Dad had to go to the hospital. Jason and Mom went hysterical. I could tell they were both suspicious of me. I described what had happened, but I knew by their facial expressions that they didn't believe me. The cops were called to investigate the crawl space. They didn't find much inside it except for a couple of rusty nails attached to a few discarded boards. They attributed the deep, ghastly scratches on Dad's arm to that. "If you heard rattling, we're thinking maybe a raccoon got in or something," one of the cops said, scratching the back of his neck. I could tell they were all as perplexed as I was. When Dad finally came home a week later, both he and Mom decided to block access to the basement. Honestly, son, we don't know if you're telling the truth or not. I guess you must be, to the extent that no one else remembers what happens down there. Except you, apparently. We're going to board up the basement door. We don't want anyone going down there, even you, Dad said, looking angry and disappointed. I knew that my parents were confused and hurt, and honestly, I didn't know what to tell them. Even though the basement door was boarded up, and everything seemed to quiet down, I just couldn't let the situation go. One night, when I knew that everyone had been asleep for a while, I snuck out of the house and went to one of the basement windows. I was shivering because I didn't want the noise of me taking my coat from the rack waking everyone up. The window was unlocked, so I opened it and slid inside, wincing as my belly scraped against a sharp rock. Once my feet found the slick basement floor, I turned around and shone my flashlight in the direction of the large room with the pool table and, more importantly, the crawl space. The cops had boarded it up more thoroughly, to make sure that no more raccoons got through. My flashlight settled on a wolf's face. My hand shook and dropped the flashlight, and I shakily combed the floor with my hand to find it again. I found it and pointed the beam in the direction of the face. I saw the wolf's face again, this time gnawing on what appeared to be a human leg. I sort of yelped, screamed, and hurried back through the crawl space. I practically ran back to my bedroom and closed the door, panting and out of breath. Now that I had direct evidence, to my mind, of something supernatural in my basement, I knew there was only one recourse available to me. I called my Uncle Jerry. Uncle Jerry was the black sheep of the family, and I remember him telling me stories of the supernatural. I didn't recall anything about a werewolf, but I decided to call him up on the way to school the next day anyway. If anybody knew, it would be him. He answered, sounding groggy and confused. Jerry was addicted to painkillers. I hadn't talked to him in a while, though I never really forgot the slurred speech and loud tone he claimed was his style. Werewolf in your basement, huh? Better off not telling your folks, they'll think you're nuts. What do I do? Who knows how long it'll stay boarded up down there, I replied. Just relax. Look, that's all there is to it. There's really not much you can do. Silver bullets or weapons can't really hurt a werewolf, that's just fiction. You just gotta make sure the door stays boarded up, and maybe do the same to the windows. Starve it. But I saw it with the leg of a corpse. How the hell? Jerry broke me off. It's getting out through the windows. That's the only possible explanation. Board 'em up. It's your only hope. I had the same problem about 20 years back when I lived out in the country. I had to block off its means of escape and starve the damn thing. I thanked Jerry for his advice and hung up. During the rest of the walk to school, I thought about what Jerry said. It wasn't a bulletproof conclusion that the wolf was getting out through the windows. I found that fairly unlikely since none of them were broken or looked like they had been messed with in any way. Then it clicked. That crawl space probably led somewhere, away from the house. How far, I didn't know. Unless I followed it and discovered the entry, exit point, I'd never be able to trap and starve it. I still haven't been down there since my talk with Jerry. I did board up the windows, to give myself the illusion that I did something. I really don't want to go into that crawl space. As I said, that patch of infinite darkness has always been a source of terror for me and my brother. Now it's only become doubly so ever since I saw what happened to my dad, and my own encounter with the beast that night. Seeing the bloody leg in its long, hairy jaws. I don't think I can do it. I just can't. Hello, my friends. I will drink cold cola and enjoy the werewolf story. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. His face streaked with tears. He writhed in his seat. His legs stretched, bare ankle appeared below his jeans. His shirt pulled loose, his back hunching. His head pressed to my car's roof. I saw claws, sharp and heavy, slide from beneath his fingernails. Underneath his face, the bones shifted shape. The brow rose and sloped, the lower jaw lengthened front and rear. Muscles bulged in his face, telling of terrible power in his bite. I have been hunting for the so-called werewolf who killed my sister. Now he was in my passenger seat, and I had only seconds to decide what to do. One August evening 4 years ago, my sister, Ginger Ames, died at the Square Diner in Drunken Tree. The coroner ruled her death accidental. She fell on broken glass when people were running away in panic. Even if that was true, I still blamed the bastard who started the panic. The man who killed Ginger was described as about 5'10" to 6 foot, wavy dark blonde hair loose to his shoulders, clean shaven, brown eyes, no scars. 20 people there, but no photos. That's panic for you. Ordinary looking, except when he was 7 feet tall and had claws he could sheathe like a cat's. That description's from the man who served his burger and fries, just before he started crying, grew a foot taller, and started killing people. This fall, a man named Robert Suter was torn open in the parking lot of the same diner. His friend Carrie White said they'd been discussing Ginger's death. Suter had been a witness that night. Another man, Jacob Evers, had been with Carrie and Suter. She dated Evers several times. She introduced Evers to Suter. They all had dinner together, but she left before they did. Suter was found dead in the parking lot. Evers hasn't been seen since. Jacob Evers was described as 5'9" to 6 foot, hazel eyes, bald, full blonde beard. Ordinary looking, aside from the whiskers. Carrie White said he had no scars or tattoos, anywhere. She had the opportunity to see. Police said the name is probably false. 4 years ago, right after Ginger's funeral, I met with Leanne Gross. Leanne had been Ginger's lover for about a year. A few months before Ginger was killed, they quietly split up, but they remained close friends and talked frequently. Now I learned that Leanne spoke to Ginger the night she was killed. She called me, asked if Travis had come by. They talked all the time, you know. I knew Travis Mosley and Ginger had been best friends since Argenta Junior High, closer than siblings. Though I was a couple of years younger, he has been my friend, too, as much as anybody so bottled up could be. Travis was a stoic, never betraying hurt or anger. Though he had a warm grin, he only rarely showed excitement or affection. Only Ginger could open him up. All our parents expected them to get married, then they both announced they were gay, the same week. That had rattled me. I never had a gay friend before, didn't know how to take it. But when I saw how he stuck by Ginger during our parents' first angry, frightened reactions, I realized I owed him the same loyalty. He disappeared for a while, earlier that summer. When he reappeared, he claimed not to know where he'd been. Ginger was the only one who really believed him. Even his parents thought he was hiding something. I didn't know what to believe. I backed him because Ginger did. Now Leanne told me that Ginger and Travis had planned to meet at the Square Diner. Ginger had called Leanne because Travis was late and hadn't called her. Leanne said Ginger thought maybe he come by here to get her, not remembering we split up. I toyed with the idea that Travis was the werewolf. Travis was the right size and build, a bit under 6 feet, and blonde. All the descriptions called the guy ordinary looking until he changed. And Travis was the complete guy next door, ordinary as oatmeal, except for 2 stark scars on his chin and cheek from a bicycle wreck. I was ashamed for even considering him. Travis, crying in public? Laughable. And I absolutely couldn't believe he hurt Ginger. He have died first. Travis hadn't come to Ginger's funeral, though, a real shock. He holed up in his parents' house in Argenta, absolutely crushed by her death. I went by to visit and found him sitting in a darkened bedroom. Though glad to see me, at first he hardly talked. When he did, his voice was flat. It's like a curse. First I lose a month, then I lose Ginger. Something happens to mom and dad, no way I could stand that. I just die. I never heard that much emotion from him. A week or 2 later, he took off. Closed his apartment, stored his stuff, and left town. He called his parents every week or 2 but never told them where he was. He turned off friend tracking on his phone. I didn't see him for 4 years. About the time Travis left, I talked to the server in the diner. Only a few weeks after Ginger's funeral, Marcus Alderizio's story was already well rehearsed. Aldo said Ginger and this blonde-haired fellow came in together. The man started crying. I thought she was giving him the Dear John, said Aldo. He started crying, then he changed. I was closer than anybody else, Aldo said, right across the counter. I could see tears dripping off his chin. I can tell you, he didn't sprout hair or big fangs, none of that. But his bones changed. When he stood up he was over 7 feet. And he had claws like a cat, that he could sheath or pop out. A lady screamed, but the real panic didn't start until some working-class hero type tried to wrestle the Catman to the ground. He eviscerated the idiot. When guts hit the floor, the diner went crazy. Less than a minute later, Ginger was dying, her belly ripped by the glass. She bled to death before paramedics arrived. The coroner found bruises on her back, from feet. Hating myself, I showed Aldo a photo of Travis on my phone. Small as the image was, he immediately picked out the facial scars. Same kind of face, real John Doe type, but this guy didn't have so much as an acne scar. Perfect skin. 2 days after Suter's murder, I talked again to Aldo. Before he says a word, I had to remind him I was Ginger's brother, and that we talked 4 years earlier. But he wasn't much help regarding Jacob Evers. I told the cops, I don't know if it's the same guy. I couldn't pick either one of them out of a decent lineup, they got that kind of face. Joe average face, no scars, no tattoos, just that beard. I recognize this guy's voice again, maybe. We talked that much, but his face? Could be anybody. At least this time I could be sure it wasn't Travis, since Jacob had slept with Carrie White. Some small comfort. How do you find a werewolf? Or werewolf? The cops thought it was some sort of stunt, and we're checking all of Ginger's acquaintances. They investigated Travis, too, but I still felt guilty. In 4 years, while I was in college, they found no leads on the diner killer. Now, with Robert Suter, there'd been another killing. They wouldn't say whether they thought it was the same killer. But either way, they weren't looking for a shapeshifter with cat claws. I was. A shapeshifter who cried. My granddad used to say of someone He was raised breathing drunk in Tree Lake. He meant that people who move to the area don't have the same attitudes as people who grew up here. And people who grew up in town don't have the same attitudes as those who lived along the shore or in the hills. Things happen around here. Sometimes people make things happen. This fall, after wondering for 4 years about Ginger's death, I wanted to make something happen. I looked up a lady who'd been my grandmother's friend when I was little and asked her what she remembered about Ginger's death. If she blamed it on drugs, like the newspapers, I have visited a while and gone home. But she said, that was a terrible thing. And that creature's still around, somewhere. You heard he killed another man last week? When I told her what I wanted, she warned, some of those folks can be as dangerous as the thing that killed Ginger. You should keep your distance from them. I told her I had to find the cat man, whatever it took. You're fixing to do it anyway, she said finally, so I suppose I ought to steer you to the right people. Let me ask about, see who's still walking this earth. I left my number. A week later she called me. There's a man named Jerry White, lives on Grace Mountain, Jackson Road. He won't do anything, but he'll put you in touch. She read me a number. Jerry White. Jackson Road. Mr. White, to you. He's upish that way. Mr. White refused to talk on the phone or invite me to his home. I'll meet you at the old Second Baptist, downtown Argenta. You know it? Across from Guthrie Park? That's it. I'll be there at 3 to meet someone else. If you come, we'll talk. I'll have a black necktie. Guthrie Park is a square block on JFK crossing the park to Second Baptist Church. I spotted a broad-shouldered bald guy with a blonde beard, maybe 40, leaning against a historic marker, gazing up at the church. I tensed, then relaxed. Since Suter was killed, I have been clenching up at every bald, bearded blonde I saw. The little church had closed down, I discovered. A sign said it would soon be a neighborhood resource center. Inside, several young people in jeans and t-shirts worked at scrubbing and painting concrete block walls. The color of Mr. White's tie was irrelevant, nobody else even had a collar. He was a tall, thin man, perhaps in his late 60s, with thick snow-white hair and a narrow mustache. I briefly told Ginger's story. I want to find him, I said. Landy said you knew people. Perhaps. Have you heard of the coterie? The what? No, sir. Good. You shouldn't have. And it would be good if no one heard of them from you. He smiled thinly. One of them is likely to have the required skill. And this sort of case often interests them. He stooped toward me. They will expect a substantial payment. Are you prepared to pay? I remembered standing by Ginger's grave, sweating in my best suit. If I can afford it, sir, I'll pay whatever it takes. The bearded guy still stood looking at the church. His eyes flicked to me as I came out, looked away, then came back more sharply. Rick, he said. The voice rang bells but the face didn't. Sorry? He grinned, obviously unsurprised at my lack of recognition. Even with a beard, that grin was familiar and took 15 years off him. I looked at the tanned scalp, the whisker jaw. Travis? Hey, man, how you been? He has grown thin since I have last seen him. The broad shoulders only emphasized that. And that bare scalp, cancer? But there was robustness to him that belied that thought. Clean, I thought, then couldn't think why. Where the hell have you been? It just burst out. He'd been such a part of Ginger's life, then he fell off the earth. Before he answered, He walked right up and put his arms around me. I returned his embrace somewhat hesitantly, unused to such display from him. He stepped back and looked me over. "I've been kinda messed up," he said. "I lost more than a month of my life, and I'm still hunting for it." "You still don't know how? Jesus, your mom must have called Ginger 200 times while you were missing, asking had she heard from you. Where have you been since?" "Around. You've seen me, but I hear you went to Texas A&M. He punched me on the shoulder. "Traitor." I had to get away. After Ginger, I couldn't stay home. Compared to Arkansas, Texas is like a foreign goddamn country. Yeah, Ginger messed me up, too. I spent so much time trying to find out what happened to her. Me, too, whenever I came home. You believe in this werewolf shit? Not one goddamn bit. His jaw clenched. I believe in plain old human fuckery, that's more than enough. Listen, I've got to get to the bank. Are you at your mom's house? We should talk, compare notes. Maybe between us, we've got all the pieces. He cocked his head. You mean you've actually found out something? I must have talked to 100 people who said they were there that night, and not more than 10 of them were for real. I think I've got a lead, at least. But I really have to get across town. You carry a phone, right? I sent him a text, so we had each other's numbers. I was in line at the bank when my phone rang. $2,000, Mr. White told me. $500 in advance, for our expenses. $1,500 if and when we find him. If we can't, we don't bill you. I whistled softly. That's a lot. This requires more than a Craigslist ad, Mr. Rames. Our techniques can be dangerous, even when we aren't seeking a known killer. Earlier he said they, not we. How fast do you need the 5? Please have it by this evening. Somebody will come for it. She'll call herself Kite. Free spirit, huh? No, Mr. Rames. A very efficient hunter. She couldn't have been 16 yet, skinny and coltish, but she scared me. When I opened my door, she stood on my porch, twitching like an open switchblade. The sunset flamed against her strawberry blonde hair. I'm Kite. I have sooner invited a hooded cobra into my apartment, but she slipped in before I could protest. I had the urge to check my ribs for slashes. I gave her a $500 cashier's check, and she gave me a receipt. We'll keep Mr. White informed. When she was gone, I drew a deep breath and felt myself shuddering. Our techniques can be dangerous, Mr. White had said. She was scary as hell but seemed like she is fast and efficient. I had no idea how fast things were about to move. In 2 hours, I know nearly everything. 15 minutes after Kite left, someone knocked. My heart pounding, fearful she returned, I opened the door. Travis stood there. The sunset had already faded. Thin, hairless, his beard grayed in the twilight. He looked like the ghost of Travis yet to come. Hey, man, he said softly. Your mom told me where you live. This a good time to talk? Yeah, sure, come on in. Don't like talking inside. How about we go for a drive around the lake? I started to protest, but something in his face stopped me. There was a look of tremendous calm, even peace, about him, but it was the peace of someone who has swallowed an enormous pain, certain of his capacity to absorb it. Yeah, sure, I said again. Let me go pee and grab a drink. Driving north through the Marina district, we exchanged news about our families, our parents, his grandfather, my older brother Gary in Atlanta. Not until we hit the quiet, dark, tree-flanked roads of Grace Mountain did our talk turn to Ginger. I summarized what I learned over the years, though I didn't admit showing his photo to Aldo. He listened intently, without commenting. At the end, he said, "Well, it's too bad, but you ain't got anything I didn't already have." But he didn't seem disappointed. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. I asked him what he knew that I didn't. "I don't know," he said. "I don't know if you're ready to hear some of it." "What?" "Travis, that's not fair. She's my sister." But I watched his face close, growing distant. I realized something. Travis had been trying to open up with me as he had with Ginger. But I wasn't Ginger, and in the end, he couldn't trust me that far. It hurt, but I resolved not to show it. So I realized something about myself. I was trying to be like Travis, stoic and strong. Before he came out, I have never guessed that a gay man would one day be my role model for tough. And a final revelation: 4 years at A&M hadn't taught me anything about dealing with death. Though older than Ginger had been when she died, I was still a kid, asking the grown-ups for help. We were winding down Grace Mountain Road, less than a minute from the center of Drunken Tree. To circle the lake, we turn east toward Shore Road, right past the Square Diner. I have been by it often. Small as Drunken Tree is, to avoid the diner you have to avoid the whole town, but tonight Ginger's memories were strong. I signaled a right turn, my grip painfully tight on the wheel. There in the bright lights, people sat eating supper. "Well, if you won't help me," I said, "somebody else will. I've been talking to people. They think they can find the guy with the claws." I stopped, embarrassed to say more. "Who the hell told you that?" "Don't snap, Pat. Sorry, I just feel so damn silly saying it. They're witches. You know the stories around here, witchcraft, covens up in the hills. They can find things cops can't." He sucked in sharply. "You were at the church. Who was it?" "People called Coterie. They say they can help." "Oh, Christ, Rick, are you crazy? They're dangerous. How the hell did you even hear of the Coterie?" I asked around. "Old folks. You know the people I could ask." The village fell behind us. From here to the dam, Shore Road was woodland and houses on large private tracts, with a few shoreside developments. The old money lived here, north of the lake. "Oh, Jesus. You don't know who you're messing with. Did any of them give you a name?" "A girl named Kite. Just a kid." "Oh shit, oh Christ. Those people will kill you if you screw with them. Why the hell did you go to them?" I started to cry, blurring my headlights on the curves. "I loved her so much," I choked out, "but she trusted you. I was just the little pest brother." His face worked. "Shit, no, man. She was hella proud of you. Aggie scholarship and all that. She talked about you all the..." He broke off. Bypassing headlights, I saw tears glisten in his eyes. And I saw something else. His beard covered his chin and his jawline, but not his upper cheeks. Clean. I thought in Guthrie Park and wondered why. The beard had confused me, but the white scar was gone from his left cheek. Without thinking, I pressed the gas. In moments I was going over 50, rural mailboxes flashing past. I couldn't ask the question in my mind, "Who are you?" Instead, I asked, "Why were you late? If you got there on time, you could have protected her." He groaned. "I was there. I tried to protect her." I glanced at him. He squeezed his eyes tight, fighting the tears streaming down his face. He started crying, Aldo said, then he changed. as Travis changed now. My friend, my sister's best friend, changed into something I couldn't explain. I pressed the gas harder. If I went fast enough, maybe he wouldn't dare attack. I whipped around a curve, tires squalling, claws sprang out to grip my dash. His growls laid a ghastly baseline beneath my shrieking tires. If he attacked me, or if I found the courage, I would slam my car's passenger side against one of the huge old hickories flashing by. Would it kill him? Even hurt him? Crazily, I thought of the times I considered having a silver-bladed knife made, just for this scene, this confrontation with my sister's killer. I came out of a curve half sideways and fought the car back into its lane. I knew Shore Road, but not at this speed. I glanced toward Travis. He sat braced in his seat, lips drew back, jaws clenched. His voice was thick, guttural. "Rick, please slow down." I shot past a westbound pickup at 80. "You killed her. You got her killed." My own voice was tight, raised just over the road noise. He terrified me, but so did my speed. A tree appeared on the right, very near the road. I tried to twitch the wheel toward it, but my arms wouldn't obey, or obeyed a deeper command. "I didn't hurt her," he growled, a voice from the pit. "Another man killed her, on purpose. You gotta believe me." Now a ditch ran along the road's right side. I missed my chance with trees over there. Tall poles for high-tension lines were flashing by on the left, shining in moonlight, too far from the road. Then I remembered the bridge over Possum Walk Creek. A short stretch to accelerate, a quick twitch to the right, and a concrete post would tear off everything behind my right headlight. He must have seen my eyes change as the bridge came into sight. As I floored the gas, he leapt at me, roaring. My last hesitation overcome, I turned squarely toward the bridge pillar. One clawed hand snatched at the wheel, tearing a gash across my raised arm. The other grabbed the transmission lever and chunked it into neutral. The engine screamed, racing. For a frantic half-second, we fought the wheel. I heard a hard bam and tearing sounds. Then we shot off the far end of the bridge and slid sideways into a chain-link fence. The car reared onto its side, and Travis fell on me. I couldn't move, pinned by his arms. I waited for the claws to rip into me. And waited. "Are you done?" Travis rumbled. "If you are, we need to get out of here. Somebody call the cops." He pulled himself off of me, up into the passenger seat. Wedging himself there, he shoved his weight back and forth, rocking the car against the fence. After 3 or 4 well-timed shoves, the car toppled, whamming down onto 4 wheels. Amazingly, the engine was still running. By feel, not taking my eyes off him, I shifted into reverse, pulled away from the fence, then pulled forward to swing onto the pavement. He opened his door and stepped out. "I'll find you," I said. "You can't get." "Don't be a dweeb," he said, startling me into silence. "I'm just gonna check the car." He walked around. I heard, "Holy crap," followed by the creak of metal and crackle of plastic. "Turn around, go back to the bridge. We got to pick up your bumper before some poor dumbass runs over it." Hardly believing myself, I did as he said. My rear bumper lay half across the road. With arms unnaturally long, he picked it up, opened my rear door, and wedged it into my back seat. "That's gonna cost you some." He climbed into the front, bending almost double to fit. Not a mark on the right side, until just behind the rear wheel. A foot further back, you missed the post completely. 6 inches forward, you lost the wheel. He pointed east. "Turn around. Drive." I drove. I could never hurt you, Rick, he said. He shook his head. I didn't hurt Ginger, either. She was safe, or should have been. Fresh tears in his eyes. He told me the true story of how Ginger died. I only interrupted once, to exclaim, "You slept with Carrie White?" just to find someone she knew. Yeah, I'm not proud of that. But I would have done worse, to find that guy. When it was over, I should have had 1,000 questions, but I only had 3. When I saw you tonight, I thought you looked, well, peaceful. Is that why? Because you got the truth about Ginger? Peaceful? Oh, man, I wish. But yeah, I feel better than I have for a long time. You haven't said, how do you change back? Start laughing? I guess to him it was a chuckle. It sounded like a bulldozer breaking up pavement. I wish. No, it's what you said first, I gotta get peaceful. I have to let go of myself. That bulldozer sound again. It's as hard as letting myself cry. I'm too uptight, even when I ought to relax. I couldn't think of but one answer to that. I pulled into the Falk Dam parking lot, put the car in park, and walked around to his door. Get out, I said. He frowned up at me, but then clambered out, standing up, and up and up. I hugged him, something I hadn't done since we were kids. It was weirdly like being 10 years old again when he was 12 and sprouting like a chinaberry tree. My head rested on his chest. I've got you, I told him now. Just for a little while. Let me hold on to everything for you. First, he cried. Then a car passed, and he gave a soundless laugh. We looked like a fine couple, I bet. And finally, I felt the tension go out of his back, out of his chest. Stand back, he hissed. From a pace away, I watched him shrink to the Travis Mosley I knew. He drew a deep breath of the cold night air, and grinned a familiar grin. Warm but shallow, he was already rebuilding his walls. I knew now they held a door for me, as they had for Ginger. I asked my last question. Why were you at Second Baptist? I already suspected the answer. I was following a woman. I think she's coterie, but I don't think she knows about me. She's a witch, I'm pretty sure, but not all the coterie are bad. I want information, and I think she'll talk to me. He jerked his head at the car. We climbed back in. You know I lost a month. By now, you can guess that's when this happened to me. When I became, whatever the hell I am. Not a werewolf, even with those claws. All stretched out like that. You're about as cat-like as a blue heron. Were giraffe. He laughed a nice normal laugh. Let's stick with a werewolf. The laugh stopped. That's when I was changed. And now I'm pretty sure who did it. The coterie made me a werewolf. We reached the Taylor Branch Bridge below the dam. He looked up, at the glaring lights and the high concrete wall. And that makes the coterie the bastards that got Ginger killed. We drove south toward home, his face as hard as Falk Dam. Hello, friends. We must be very careful, my friends. Okay, let's get started. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. So I guess you all know about werewolves. I mean seriously, if you never ever have heard about one, you must be living under a rock. A really big one. I need to confess to you guys what I saw because this is crazy. I don't even know if what I saw was real or my imagination, but was it creepy? So I and my wife both agreed to go on holiday to Romania. We are both from England and I wanted to know how the country that beat us 4-2 in the U21 European football looked like. She did some googling and found out Cluj-Napoca would be nice since we didn't want to go to the capital because she thought it was so cliché. I didn't really care that much. So we left on 24th May, and we were both really happy. We got on the plane and we left Romania. Yay! On our way there, nothing special happened except I'm frightened by planes because I'm scared of heights. I know, sometimes I can be a pussy but I'm just not that plane guy. So it took us 4 hours to get there and we arrived at the Ivorimeancu airport. All nice and good. I helped my wife take the luggage and we went searching for a motel or something. We took an Uber and we went to the west of the city as there were cheaper motels from what I heard from the locals. The city was great, nice people, nice buildings and nice everything. My wife was so excited I almost thought she was gonna explode in it. We didn't know Romanian but we hoped they would know English. Hey. We arrived at the motel and to be honest, it was pretty shitty but at least I had a pillow to put my head on and it was actually very cheap, so it worked for us. We went to this history museum but I don't think you guys care about that. So, one night, I think it was 4 AM I just woke up randomly. I don't know why to this day. But I know I just couldn't get myself to sleep again. I said bloody hell and just go outside, take a cig. I saw there was a guy at a vending machine and went to him, maybe chat a little. I figured he probably wouldn't know English but went for it anyway. Hey, what's up? I looked at him. He was wearing a white hoodie and a cap. I'm gonna be honest, I thought he was some drug dealer or something but I wanted to talk to someone and my wife doesn't like it when I wake her up. Hello, I'm good. How about you? He told me as he got his fresh and cold Pepsi from the vending machine. I was surprised he knew English. Most of the people we've come across had a hard time understanding us. Guess these folks from Romania don't speak very good English. Anyways, maybe it's just because we only talked to grown-up men, not with some random teenagers. And this guy looked like 40 plus. So it was nice seeing him. He knows how to talk. Oh, finally, I thought nobody knows how to speak properly in this city. Haha. I glanced at his Pepsi. Well, you were probably talking to some old motherfuckers, man. What are you doing up this late? He asked me. Nothing, just thought I can get some fresh air. I took some money from my pocket and got myself a Pepsi too from that vending. Where are you from? He asked me with a grin on his face. I'm from London, mate. I'm on holiday here. I didn't tell him I was with my wife or something. The guy was friendly but didn't look like he was friendly. Oh, London. I know, I've been there with work. Anyways, gotta go. He told me as he rushed into an alley. Figured he was some kind of a hobo. I stood there drinking my Pepsi when I heard a loud growl from the alley. I shook. That was no dog growl. It was so loud I think everybody heard it. That hobo couldn't growl like that, I thought to myself. What was he doing? I heard a scream and I knew shit went off. At first, I didn't know what to do. I was scared. What that could be? A bear? A wolf? A lion? A tiger? What the fuck? So I said fuck it and went to the alley. What I saw wasn't human, neither animal. It was some kind of creature, big and muscular. It had his hand in the dumpster and it was so dark I didn't see the guy but I figured that thing must have killed him. It ran away on all fours at supernatural speed. I sat there like an idiot trying to convince myself it wasn't real. It's a hallucination or it's a dream. I went into the alley, I know. Stupid idea, and I got my phone out. I put on the flashlight and looked into the dumpster. It smelt really bad. What I saw will haunt me forever and ever. It was the hobo's head, with claw marks on it. What do you get when you cross a werewolf and a vampire? A monster who bites you, and then one that eats you. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. We were always told not to venture out on Werewolf Road late at night when we were children, but one night we were just too damn determined to know why the teenagers from our small town were so frightened by the unnerving place, that we had to see for ourselves. I had my small backpack loaded with snacks, a flashlight with spare batteries, a flare gun with a can of bear spray, and attached to my backpack was my sleeping bag. The four of us gathered together behind my cousin's house, who lived just 2 houses down across the street, and together we all exchanged scary legends and stories we had heard about the road and the cemetery on it. I heard there's a woman in the trees who jumps on people's cars late at night. She sleeps on a mattress with her dead, rotting baby. Evan said with a morbid sense of pride in his voice. That's baloney, my cousin Justin said, shaking his head. I heard she was just drunk and that happened once. The baby wasn't dead, the police took it from her though. He said in a matter-of-fact tone. You guys ever hear about the dead puppy in the box my brother found in the cemetery? I said aloud. The other 3 looked at me, their eyes widening with interest as I spoke up. He said he went up there alone one day around 2 years ago when we moved here. He said he was walking through the graveyard and near one of the tombstones there was a purple box. He saw blood on the outside of the box and grabbed a stick to open it, and there was a dead puppy that someone sacrificed. He looked up and saw streamers in the trees and an area where it looked like there was a fire. For 4 adolescent boys with active imaginations, you could only picture how terrified we were. There would have been next to no possibility that we would venture out anywhere such as that alone, but together, it was a different story. We were all in this together, despite how frightening it was. Oh come on, he's just jacking with ya. Ronnie, the youngest of us 4, spouted. I could tell if he was lying, and believe me, he wasn't. He had a look on his face that makes me feel like he wasn't. Are we gonna do this or not? Justin said, seemingly irritated by the stories. We each shrugged and picked up our belongings, and next thing we knew, we were walking towards the woods that led to the legendary road on the other side. The leaves and sticks cracked beneath our feet as we stumbled around in the pitch-black summer night. Justin had his flashlight shining ahead of our group. The narrow beam shone the heavy thicket that surrounded us. In some places, you could see, even in the absence of light, the silhouettes of fast food litter-like styrofoam cups of various sizes and plastic bottles or discarded cans that were scattered about. I felt the crunch of an empty beer can under my foot. I cursed under my breath as I realized just how loud and inconvenient my misstep was. Evan turned around and shushed me as we continued walking. Fuck off, Evan, I said in a stern but quiet voice. I raised my hand as he turned forward, the thought crossing my mind to smack the back of his head. I bit my bottom lip and considered how bad that could be for us if the wrong group of people noticed our presence. Okay, I can see the road. We need to decide right now if we are going to drop our stuff off first, and then continue, or if we're going to take everything. Justin said. I looked around at the flat, dry ground that was covered in leaves nearby. That looks like a perfect area to set up camp, I said, pointing at the spot. We all four removed our bags as we walked over to the grounds I chose, setting them down. Anything valuable any of you might need to grab before we go? Justin asked. I ran to my bag and grabbed the bear spray, assuming it would be good just in case we ran into some trouble. Ronnie and Evan shook their heads and continued with him as he moved his flashlight from off our newly claimed campsite and headed for the cemetery on Werewolf Road. I quickly caught up to them as we continued. In the humid summer night, there wasn't a sound to be heard besides a barn owl that could be heard in a tree nearby, and our feet lightly moving across the earth. We reached the dirt road, and I raised my head and looked around as what sounded like something heavy fell through a mess of branches, perhaps a decrepit tree or a large animal. Whatever that was, it wasn't small. I heard Ronnie say. I looked over at him and was leaning over his bent knees, wiping his sweaty face off with his dark shirt. He raised up and shook it, attempting to cool off. We four sat in silence. The night now grew more ominous. We stared at the dirt road, and I now looked to the right, remembering the wooden bridge that led to the cemetery. It's this way, I said. We continued walking. I turned around to notice the rest of the group behind me, Justin still holding the flashlight, but aiming it up in the trees rather than the very dark road ahead. Justin, can I see the flashlight? I asked. Here you go, he said as he quickly stretched his arm out and held it out like the Olympic torch. We approached the wooden bridge. As we came closer, I looked out at the creek, where you could see a pile of dead hogs, perhaps 6 or more, on the creek bed. The stench from their rotting, bloated corpses fouled the air. On the bridge was a pentagram drawn out near the very center. It had been faded from the elements, but you could still see it fairly well. We gathered around it, not saying a thing aloud. The cemetery is just up the road, I said. We continued across the bridge, and I noticed that Ronnie turned his head and looked back at the creek where the dead hogs were. Did you guys see that, or smell it at least? We continued walking, not thinking too much about it. There could have been many reasons for that. Not every little thing had to be unusual, even to young boys who longed for excitement. As we got closer to the cemetery, we noticed a bright light coming from inside its fence. It was a fire. We rushed down the road, trying our best to stay low and keep quiet as we grew dangerously closer to the cemetery. We got off the road and made our way up a ditch, which led us into the woods that surrounded the cemetery fence line. As we lined up to peer through the fence, we were careful to stay low. Embers lingered around the blaze like fireflies in the cemetery landscape, and we watched as these beings that gathered around the fire. They weren't human. There hadn't been a chance they were human at all. They were beastly, savage creatures that were swift on all fours. When they were on the lookout, they stood on their hind legs and perched, exposing their ape-like chests and torsos. The rest of their bodies looked more canine, like a greyhound. Their faces were covered in heavy, beaked masks that looked similar to the surgeon makes worn during the Black Plague, but these were more of a ghastly sight on such already terrifying monsters. I knew we couldn't dare trespass on their fiery territory. I watched as one lurked near a tombstone and dug like a canine into the ground. I listened as we could hear what sounded like gurgling coming from the plot, dirt being thrown viciously behind the creature. The rest of the pack began to gurgle and click their mouths as they walked around the fire. 3 other creatures gathered near the burial plot where the first creature dug, and the other 3 stood on their hind legs and looked around. I watched as the creature that was now burrowed deep in the ground climbed out of the hole with a rotating arm in its mouth. It sat next to the others, arm between its two hands, sniffing. The others gurgled and sniffed in between chirps. Another creature crawled into the hole and came back to the surface with a dismembered leg in its mouth and carried it away from the rest of the group. Justin looked over at the rest of us with a face full of shock, and he spoke very hesitantly in an almost faint whisper, trying his best to control his breathing. "We've got to get the hell out of here. I don't know what those things are, but they aren't people. I say we leave our stuff at the campsite and get back to my place fast." The four of us backed away from the fence and we got as close to the bottom of the ditch as we could. We knew that any little noise from us could be fatal. The sticky summer air attracted unrelenting mosquitoes that swarmed around our ears and our sweaty necks and arms. We tried for our lives to ignore the high-pitched buzz that rang in our ears as we crept towards the bridge. I heard a gurgling sound in a nearby tree overhead. It rattled and clicked, signaling the others to move in on us. I looked up to see it as, through its frightening mask that covered its disfigured face, it looked down on me with its black, dilated pupils as I felt the sweat collect in my eyes and the mosquitoes I refused to away at bite into my neck. The other three were frozen in place, staring at the creature as well. I smelled urine in the air from Ronnie, as he couldn't anymore hold his bladder in fear. I couldn't blame him. There wasn't a moment for ridicule or disparagement. The creature stared into our eyes, and I heard the fence line viciously rattle as the other creatures climbed and jumped it, closing in on our misfortunate, desperate souls. Justin spoke up. "Guys, any ideas?" I slowly reached into my pocket and felt for a lighter. In my other pocket was the big can of bear spray. We let them close in on us dangerously to our discomfort, but I knew this was an ample opportunity to quickly discharge as much of the can on them as I could while we still had a chance. I watched as the creatures fell on their backs, croaking and clicking their tongues with this very awful and loud scream that came out in between gurgles and rattles. They nervously clicked more after this. The creature in the tree appeared to fear to jump. It leapt in the opposite direction, scurrying near the cemetery fire. We quickly rushed across the bridge, we jumping into the creek near the dead hogs and trudging through the water. It was only 5 minutes or less to Justin's home. The time we counted down together, not allowing failure to escape the grip of such violent heinous of creatures. We saw the porch light nearby as we entered into the neighborhood. It had been a welcome relief to know that we had arrived finally. As I reached Justin's patio under the floodlight, I took a moment to catch my breath. I turned my head to look around, and I realized I had been the only one who reached my cousin's backyard. I called out each of their names, but without success. I waited around 5 minutes when I saw the beam of Justin's flashlight shine into the backyard from over the fence. I watched as him and Evan and Ronnie boosted each other over his fence as I continued to walk over to them and ask them what exactly kept them so long. I watched them, and something seemed different about their demeanors. They each had a look in their eyes that unnerved me. Justin spoke up. "You left us behind. You didn't even let us catch up with you. What the hell were you thinking?" he said angrily. I walked in circles, looking up at the three of them as they stared at me with unequivocal disapproval nonetheless. After the three of them refused to talk to me that night, I finally decided to walk home. As I got to my room, I quickly stripped to my boxers and fell onto my bed. I woke up around 8:30 in the morning to my father calling out to me from his office, and he said, "Tyler, come in here right now." I walked into my father's office. I watched as he held his balled fist over his mouth, leaning back in his leather chair. He ran his other hand through his hair and looked at me. "Your cousin and your friends are missing. What happened last night? I thought about it for a moment but hesitated on giving full disclosure. We just hung out till early this morning and then I came home around 1 o'clock this morning. They were there when I left. Did you go anywhere with them? Or did they have somewhere they wanted to go? He leaned forward. The only place we went to was the cemetery on Werewolf Road.